Unaware she just closed a $100 billion deal, her husband abandoned her pregnant with triplets to marry his lover. What she did next will shock you. He didn't just walk out. He erased her in one night. On the same day, Grace Turner unknowingly secured a $100 billion corporate deal that would change her destiny. Her husband Daniel packed his bags, left her 7 months pregnant with triplets, and drove away straight into the arms of his mistress, Lila, her own co-worker. "Grace, you deserve someone better," he said coldly, placing his wedding ring on the table. "I can't do this anymore." Those words tore through her like glass. While her world collapsed around her, Daniel's rose glittering with cameras, headlines, and a new wife by his side. He thought she would disappear quietly. He thought she was just a broken wife with 3 unborn children and no fight left in her. But what he didn't know was that the woman he left behind had just signed away a fortune that would soon make her one of the most powerful shareholders in the empire he wanted to control. This is not just a story of betrayal, it's a story of awakening, of a woman who turned silence into strategy, of a mother who transformed pain into power, of karma delivered not through rage but through calm, calculated justice. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't screamed in anger, it's whispered in success. And when silence speaks louder than pride, every betrayer must finally listen. Dear viewers, thank you for being here. If you watch without subscribing, it's like letting her courage go unheard. But when you click that button, you stand with every woman who was left behind, every promise broken, and every heart that refused to stay silent. Please subscribe now, and in the comments, tell us where you're watching from, because this story, this rise from ruin, belongs to all of us. The kettle screamed before the morning did. Steam hissed through the small apartment, catching the soft rays of dawn as they slipped through half-drawn curtains. The kitchen smelled of coffee and warm toast, and yet there was a quiet ache beneath the calm, the kind of silence that holds its breath before the world changes. Grace Turner, 32, stood barefoot by the counter, her round belly pressing against her loose cotton dress. 7 months pregnant with triplets and still typing on her laptop with the same focus she once had in her early career days. Her fingers moved quickly across the keyboard, finishing the final part of a report for a global tech startup called Axiom Technologies, where she worked remotely as a financial analyst. She was known in her team as the quiet mind behind big numbers. Grace wasn't aware that this morning, those same numbers had just helped finalize one of the largest business mergers in history, a $100 billion deal between Axiom and its international partner, Zenith Systems. Her email notification blinked. Final confirmation sent congratulations to all contributors. She smiled softly, not realizing the weight of those words. To her, it was simply another project well done. She shut her laptop and exhaled, rubbing her lower back. Her eyes moved toward the closed bedroom door. Inside, her husband, Daniel Turner, was still asleep. Daniel, 35, was handsome, fit, and ambitious, the kind of man who wore confidence like a tailored suit. Once he'd told her he admired her focus and simplicity. Lately, though, his compliments had grown rare, replaced by quiet irritation and late-night absences. Grace turned back to the stove, flipping eggs while her thoughts drifted to their past. 10 years earlier. They were in college then, sharing one notebook, 2 dreams. Grace was the scholarship student who studied until dawn. Daniel, the business major who believed they could conquer the world together. They made promises under the yellow campus lights about houses with gardens, little kids, and late-night takeout when life got busy. He once told her, "You'll be the heart, I'll be the drive," and she believed him. The smell of toast brought her back. Grace plated breakfast eggs, toast, and coffee, just the way he liked, black with 2 sugars. She set it neatly on the table and went to wake him. Inside the room, Daniel sat at the edge of the bed, already dressed in his crisp shirt, scrolling through his phone. His tie lay crumpled beside him. "You're up early," Grace said gently, her voice soft like the light spilling in. He didn't look up. "Got a meeting? Before 8? She asked, trying to smile. "You barely slept," Daniel sighed. "Grace, not today. I'm late." She stood there for a moment, her hand resting on the doorframe. He brushed past her, grabbed a piece of toast, and kissed her cheek half-heartedly, the kind of kiss that said goodbye but didn't mean it. Grace forced a smile. "I have some good news to tell you tonight," she said quietly. He only murmured, "We'll talk later," before walking out. The door clicked shut. The apartment fell still again. Only the clock ticked loud, steady, almost cruel. Grace stared at the empty table where his coffee grew cold. She sat down, pressing her palm against her belly as the babies shifted inside her. "He's been so distant lately," she whispered to the room. "Maybe it's just stress." Her phone buzzed. An email notification. From Axiom Technologies. Subject: Merger finalized, employee bonus allocations to follow. Grace smiled faintly and clicked open the file. She skimmed the long text, not noticing the number buried near the bottom. 100 billion.0 billion. She closed the laptop, humming to herself. She didn't see that line again, not yet. She reached for her phone and typed a quick message to Daniel. "Can't wait to tell you my good news tonight." The message sent instantly. She waited for the familiar typing dots to appear. They didn't. A small frown crossed her face. She brushed it off, telling herself he must be driving. But deep down, something felt off, the kind of silence that doesn't come from distance, but from disconnection. She turned on the small radio, letting soft piano music fill the room. The sunlight warmed her skin, and for a moment, she allowed herself to imagine the evening him coming home, maybe smiling, maybe even proud of her. But as she stood there, the camera of life quietly zoomed in on the laptop screen she'd left open. The cursor blinked beside the words, "Merger completion. 100 billion. A name sat under the signatories: Grace E. Turner, listed as primary analyst, project lead. And just above it, in smaller gray text, an unread message flashed in her inbox. From Daniel Turner. Subject: We need to talk. Outside, the morning sunlight dimmed for just a second as clouds moved in. Inside, Grace smiled softly to herself, unaware that her quiet brilliance had already changed her life, and that by tonight, the warmth of her home would turn into silence she would never forget. A gust of wind rattled the window slightly. It sounded almost like a warning, or maybe a whisper of what was coming next. The sound of the front door slamming echoed through the apartment like thunder. Plates rattled. A fork clattered to the floor. Grace froze in the middle of the living room, her hand resting on her swollen belly. Daniel stood near the door, his face pale, eyes cold, a suitcase at his feet. The evening light through the window had turned silver gray, heavy with rain. The table she had set for dinner gleamed, untouched steam rising from the plates that would never be eaten. "Daniel," her voice trembled. "What's going on?" He didn't answer at first. He just looked at her, the woman who had built her days around him, who carried not one but three of his children. His eyes shifted past her, almost as if she were a stranger blocking his way. Finally, he said, flat and final, "Grace, I can't do this anymore." The words hit like a physical blow. She took a step closer, her bare feet pressing against the cold tile. "Can't do what? Daniel, what are you saying?" He exhaled sharply, gripping the handle of the suitcase. "This, us, the kids, everything. I feel trapped, Grace." Her heart sank. "Trapped?" she repeated, almost whispering. "We wanted this, the house, the babies, the family. You said..." "That was before," he interrupted, his tone cutting. "Before everything got too heavy. I can't breathe in this life anymore." She blinked, confusion flooding her face. "Daniel, you're just tired. You said work was rough." He cut her off again, this time with a slight tremor in his voice. "It's not about work. It's about us." He hesitated, then added softly, "There's someone else." The world went still. The rain outside began to fall harder, hammering against the window. Grace's lips parted, but no sound came. Her eyes filled, yet her tears refused to fall. "Someone else?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "Her name is Lila. You met her once at the company gala. She makes me feel alive again." Grace took a shaky step backward, gripping the edge of the table for balance. The pain spread through her chest like ice. "You're leaving me? For her?" He said nothing. Silence was worse than an answer. Her mind reeled. Lila, the glamorous PR executive who had smiled too long at Daniel, laughed too easily at his jokes. Grace had brushed off the unease then, trusting him, trusting love. Now, the truth stood in front of her with a suitcase and no remorse. She stared at him, eyes wide, voice trembling but firm. I'm carrying your children, Daniel. 3 of them. You can't walk out now. He ran a hand through his hair, looking away. I'm sorry. I can't do this. You deserve someone better. I'm not that man. He reached into his pocket and placed something on the table, his wedding ring. The small circle of gold rolled once before, stopping beside a folded note. Her body stiffened as she watched him pick up the suitcase and open the door. The sound of heels clicked behind him. Grace's gaze lifted, and there, standing in the doorway, dressed in a beige trench coat and holding an umbrella, was Lila Carter, 30, polished, beautiful, and expressionless. Are you ready? Lila asked quietly. Her voice was calm, smooth like someone who'd already won. Daniel nodded, avoiding Grace's eyes. Yeah, let's go. Grace's breath caught. You brought her here? Her voice cracked, the disbelief mixing with rage and heartbreak. Daniel paused, but didn't answer. He just stepped out into the hallway. Lila turned once toward Grace. Their eyes met, one woman, broken, the other composed. There was no apology in Lila's stare, only quiet triumph. The door closed, and then silence. Grace's hands trembled as she reached for the ring on the table. The metal was still warm. The note beside it read, You deserve someone better. I can't do this. She dropped it. Her breath came out uneven. The babies inside her shifted almost as if they felt her pain. She tried to call Daniel, her fingers shaking over the screen. The phone rang once, twice, then cut off. She tried again. This time a cold voice replied, The number you've dialed is no longer in service. Her phone slipped from her hand and hit the floor. The room felt too big now. The dinner plates steamed quietly in the background, their warmth fading fast. Grace slid into the chair at the table, staring blankly at the empty seat across from her. The rain outside had turned into a full storm, wind thrashing against the glass as if the world itself mourned for her. Slowly she reached for her phone again, hoping for anything to ground her. A notification flashed at the top of the screen. Breaking news. Tech company seals record-breaking $100 billion deal. Her mind didn't register it. She was staring through the words, numb. Only the faint irony hung in the air that she had just built a fortune and lost everything that made her want it. She whispered to no one, You left? Now? When we needed you most? That night, as the rain drummed against the windows, Grace's mind drifted to the early days of their marriage, the time before everything cracked. Daniel had once been gentle, the kind of man who carried her shoes after long walks and promised her forever. When she miscarried their first child 3 years ago, he had held her in his arms and whispered, Next time, we'll have a house full of laughter. They moved into this very apartment after that loss, calling it their fresh start. Grace decorated every corner with hope photos from their honeymoon, small notes he left her when they were still in love. But soon after, Daniel began working late, chasing promotions, chasing validation. Grace thought he was building for their future. She didn't realize he was building an exit. Now, as she sat alone with his empty chair across from her, the echoes of those old promises felt like ghosts haunting unfinished sentences from a man who no longer existed. And somewhere deep inside, a new kind of silence began to form, not of despair, but of quiet resolve. Outside, thunder rolled like an unanswered cry. Inside, Grace sat alone, surrounded by food that no longer mattered, love that no longer existed, and silence that screamed louder than any argument ever could. Her phone dimmed to black, but the reflection of her face stayed faintly visible, calm on the outside, breaking inside. And in that faint reflection, the next shadow began to stir, a storm far colder than the one outside, waiting quietly for its time to come. The hospital monitor beeped softly, steady but fragile like her heart trying to remember its rhythm. Grace blinked against the bright white lights, pain still echoing through her body. The air smelled of antiseptic and fresh linen. Her body felt hollow, but her arms were full, 3 tiny babies sleeping beside her in the clear crib. Their faces were peaceful, untouched by the chaos waiting beyond the walls. Then came the knock. A nurse stepped in, cheerful and warm, her voice gentle. Good morning, Mrs. Turner. You did wonderfully. 3 strong babies, all healthy. Grace nodded weakly. The nurse adjusted the blankets over the newborns, then glanced at her. Anyone coming to see you today? The father, maybe? Grace hesitated. Her lips parted, but no sound came. She looked away, eyes glistening. No, not today. The nurse smiled kindly, unaware of the knife that question had twisted. That's all right. You're stronger than you know. Grace managed a faint smile. Strength doesn't feel like this. The nurse touched her arm, then left quietly, pulling the curtain halfway closed behind her. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful, it was the kind that pressed on the chest, reminding you that you were alone. Grace stared at the crib. 3 lives breathing softly. 3 small miracles born into a world that had already taken something from them. Her phone lay on the bedside table. She hadn't touched it in days, afraid of what she might see, afraid of what silence might confirm. But something inside her whispered, "You have to know." With trembling fingers, she reached for it. The screen lit up. Hundreds of notifications, missed calls from coworkers, emails from her company congratulating her for the historic success of the Axiom Zenith merger. She scrolled past them, her eyes blurry from exhaustion. Then she froze. A headline blazed across her news feed. CEO Daniel Turner marries PR executive Lila Carter in lavish ceremony. Her breath caught, her chest tightened. She clicked the article. Photos loaded clear, cruel, glittering. Daniel in a sharp black tuxedo smiling wide. Lila beside him, glowing in white silk, her hand in his. Around them, a sea of flashing cameras and champagne flutes. Grace stared at the photo as if it were a hallucination. The man in the picture was her husband, the same man who had walked out on her 2 weeks ago, saying he needed time to breathe. But there he was, laughing, alive, free. Her hand shook as she zoomed in on the image. Daniel's wrist glinted the same silver watch she'd given him for their anniversary. A small engraving on the back read, "For the man who never gives up." Tears spilled down her cheeks. She wiped them quickly, afraid of waking the babies. Her breathing turned shallow, her lips trembling. Another photo, Lila, tossing her bouquet into the air, smiling at the camera. Her caption read, "Some stories are meant to start over." Grace's vision blurred. Start over? Her memory flashed a moment from months ago. The company gala. Daniel introducing Lila with that proud smile. "Grace, this is Lila. She's handling PR for the new deal." Smart as they come. Lila had laughed, her eyes lingering a bit too long on Daniel. "You're lucky, Grace. He's the most dedicated man I've met." At the time, Grace had brushed it off. A harmless coworker, a harmless laugh. Now, she realized those laughs had been building a home behind her back. She placed the phone face down and turned to her babies. They shifted softly, their tiny fingers curling. For a moment, she felt her heart split in two, half for the love she lost, half for the life she now had to protect. The door opened again. The nurse peeked in. "Everything all right?" Grace forced a small nod. "Yes," she whispered. "Everything's fine." But it wasn't fine. It would never be the same again. She turned her gaze to match her gaze, the window. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving streaks on the glass that caught the fading light. The city skyline shimmered in the distance, cold, sharp, untouchable. Grace looked back at her phone one last time. The screen dimmed, but the image of Daniel and Lila stayed burned in her mind, his hand on another woman's waist, his smile brighter than ever. A deep, calm silence filled the room. Her tears dried. Her face hardened, not with anger yet, but with clarity. Unseen beneath the white sheets, her hand curled into a quiet fist. Somewhere deep inside her, something began to shift, not rage, not revenge, but resolve. She leaned back, eyes open, whispering under her breath, "They think they've won. Let them." Outside, a single car horn echoed faintly distant, sharp and fading. Inside, Grace's heartbeat steadied slow, even, purposeful. And just before the monitor's soft beeping faded into the night, her phone lit up one more time, a new message. From her company. "Congratulations, Grace. Your equity activation paperwork has been approved." Her eyes flicked toward it. For the first time since Daniel left, she didn't cry. She just stared quiet, still, unreadable. And in that silence, the seeds of something greater began to grow. Something neither Daniel nor Lila would ever see coming. The rain came back before dawn, hammering the windows as if trying to wake her. Grace startled awake on the couch, the sound mixing with the quiet whimpers of her newborns in their cribs beside her. Empty bottles, folded baby clothes, and unpaid bills filled the small apartment pieces of a life she was still trying to hold together. Her body was exhausted, but her mind refused to rest. Every night since the hospital, sleep had become a luxury she couldn't afford. Each time she closed her eyes, the image returned Daniel in his tuxedo, smiling beside Lila in white. She sat up slowly, pressing a hand against her aching ribs. The clock blinked, 3:47 a.m. The silence was too loud. Then her gaze fell on the corner of the room. Her old laptop, half hidden under a pile of unopened mail. The same laptop she'd used the morning before Daniel left. Something inside her stirred, a quiet pull, curiosity mixed with pain. She reached for it, brushed off the dust, and opened it. The screen flickered to life, glowing softly in the dark. Her inbox flooded with unread messages. Dozens from Axiom Technologies, the company she had helped build from the ground up. She clicked one. Subject: merger completion. Congratulations to all contributors. Her heartbeat quickened. She remembered signing the papers, but she had never looked closely. She clicked the attached file. There it was again, a single line buried deep in the contract summary. Total value, $100 billion. Grace stared, barely breathing. She scrolled down. Her name appeared clearly. Grace E. Turner, lead financial analyst, project lead. Her hands began to tremble. Not from fear this time, but from awakening. Slowly she opened another message, an internal memo. It mentioned equity compensation, employee stock options, and shareholder conversion rights. She frowned. None of that had ever been explained to her. Daniel used to handle the finances. He told her not to worry about the boring parts. Now she read every line, every term, every figure, and what she discovered made her eyes widen. Grace had been granted deferred shares worth millions hidden behind corporate jargon, pending her signature of final delivery confirmation. That signature had already been done by her own hand. For the first time in months, she smiled. It wasn't joy. It was understanding. She whispered into the glow of the screen. He thought I was the weak one. He didn't read the fine print either. She printed the documents and began arranging them neatly on the table, page by page, like evidence at a crime scene. The sound of the printer filled the apartment, steady and relentless. As the babies stirred, she glanced at them with soft eyes. "Mommy's just working," she said quietly. "We're going to be okay." The room, once filled with grief, now pulsed with quiet energy. Grace's mind sharpened. Every click of the mouse felt like recovery. Every highlighted word felt like revenge taking shape. Hours passed unnoticed. The rain softened. The city outside began to wake, but Grace didn't move. Her reflection in the laptop screen looked different now. Not broken, not weak, but calculating. When dawn finally spilled through the curtains, the table was covered with documents. Her name repeated across them in black and white, undeniable. Grace leaned back, exhausted yet alive. "This," she whispered, "is where it begins." She saved one last file, a corporate report showing Axiom's new acquisitions. Her eyes paused on one small line. Pending acquisition Turner. Associates. Daniel's company. Her lips parted slightly. The faintest smile touched her face. The babies stirred again, their soft cries filling the silence. Grace rose, her expression calm, her movements sure. Outside, the storm clouds were fading, but inside her apartment, something else had started, a different kind of storm, slow and silent. And as she whispered good morning to her children, the printer hummed again, spitting out one last sheet, the company's next merger list. At the very bottom, a single note read, "Transition of ownership expected within 12 months." Grace's eyes narrowed slightly. The light from the screen glinted against her face like a spark catching fire. And in that small, quiet moment, the first seed of revenge began to grow. The city lights glittered beneath her window like scattered diamonds. But Grace wasn't looking at the skyline, she was looking at the future she was building from its ashes. Her fingers moved fast over the passer's keyboard, the sound sharp, confident. The screen glowed with legal forms, corporate registration documents, and filings stamped with her new name, Eden Holdings, LLC. Her pulse thudded as she typed in the final detail. Founder Grace E. Turner. A year had passed since the hospital. A year since Daniel's betrayal had crushed her. But that same year had reshaped her into someone he would no longer recognize. She now stood in a small rented office high above the city white walls. Clean desk and 3 framed baby photos lined neatly beside a single folder labeled Ownership Transfer, Axiom Equity Allocation. Grace glanced at the pictures, smiling faintly. Her triplets, her quiet reason for surviving every sleepless night. They had grown strong, just like her. But this time, her strength wasn't built from love. It was built from focus. It had started slowly. One class, one book, one small step each night after she put the babies to bed. She had enrolled in an online course in corporate law and forensic accounting, studying with headphones on while bottles and baby monitors surrounded her. Her mentor, Dr. Evelyn Hart, a retired financial lawyer in her 60s, had been her first guide. Evelyn had spotted her brilliance immediately. "You have an instinct for numbers," Evelyn had told her. "But instincts mean nothing without structure. Learn the system, then use it." Grace did. She learned every clause, every loophole, every silence the law allowed her to use as a weapon. Now that knowledge was being forged into something real. She clicked Submit on her registration form. A small confirmation message blinked on her screen. Eden Holdings successfully incorporated. A quiet satisfaction filled her chest. Not joy, not revenge, just balance, returning to a world that had once spun out of control. Grace reached for the folder and flipped through her Axiom stock records. Her deferred shares had finally been converted. The value was staggering. The holdings placed her as the 3rd largest shareholder in a major conglomerate now preparing to acquire new companies. Her eyes stopped at one name buried in the acquisition list: Turner and Associates, Daniel's firm. For a moment her hand froze above the page. Then a slow, measured smile touched her lips. "You left me with nothing," she whispered, her voice calm, deliberate. "I built everything in silence." She placed the folder beside the photos of her children, 4 symbols of creation, 3 lives born from love, 1 empire born from betrayal. The office was quiet except for the ticking of a small desk clock. The sun was beginning to rise, painting the skyline gold. The world outside had no idea that a storm was quietly forming behind that calm face. Grace closed her laptop, straightened her posture, and looked at her reflection in the window. The woman staring back wasn't the same one Daniel had left. Her eyes were steady, her face serene, her silence sharpened into strategy. She picked up her pen and circled the date of the next Axiom board meeting. Her time had come. In the faint hum of the morning city, a single phone notification appeared on her screen. Breaking news: Axiom Group to acquire Turner and Associates. Official announcement expected soon. Grace didn't blink. She only whispered to herself, "Perfect timing." Outside, the sunlight flooded the glass towers. Inside, Grace's quiet revenge had just been born, and like the dawn itself, it was unstoppable. Somewhere far below, in another building, Daniel Turner's phone buzzed with the same news. And for the first time since he left her, their names were once again on the same page. The sound of glass shattering ripped through the mansion. Daniel slammed his whiskey tumbler against the wall, shards glittering under the morning light that poured through the wide windows of their expensive home. The front page newspaper lay crumpled on the marble floor, headlines screaming in bold black letters: Turner and Associates under financial scrutiny, major clients pull out amid audit rumors. Lila rushed into the room, silk robe dragging against the floor, her expression both annoyed and alarmed. "Daniel, what is going on? You're scaring the staff." He paced back and forth, jaw tight. "The press got hold of our internal numbers. Someone leaked them. Investors are pulling out, and the board is panicking." Lila picked up the newspaper and scanned the article. "It says the delays are linked to merger filings with Axiom Group." She looked up sharply. "Didn't you tell me that was all handled?" Daniel stopped. The mention of Axiom sent a chill through him. "It was," he said quickly, rubbing his temples. "At least it should have been." Lila folded her arms. "You need to get ahead of this. Hire a PR firm. We can spin it, say it's just the economy." Her calm tone irritated him. "It's not the economy. Lila, something's wrong. Someone is targeting me." The tension thickened. The house, large, elegant, soulless, felt colder than usual. Even the expensive chandelier above them seemed to swing slightly, as if listening. Daniel stormed into his home office, papers scattered across his desk. The computer screen was filled with urgent emails. He clicked one marked urgent. Legal Compliance Request Section 12. B. The sender's name froze him. Eden Holdings Legal Department on behalf of Axiom Group Integration Review. The message was short, clinical. Dear Mr. Turner, as part of Axiom's acquisition process, please provide full documentation of all outstanding financial activities within 48 hours, as required under Section 12B of the Merger Integration Policy. Respectfully, Grace E. Turner, Managing Director, Eden Holdings. His hands trembled as he reread it. The name hit like lightning. Grace, he whispered. Lila, standing behind him, leaned closer. Grace Turner? Your ex-wife? He turned slowly toward her, face pale. It can't be. She doesn't have that kind of power. But even as he said it, the words felt hollow. Grace had always been smarter than he gave her credit for. Lila frowned, trying to stay composed. Maybe it's just a coincidence. Someone else with the same name. Daniel's voice dropped to a hoarse whisper. No, she's behind this. She's coming for me. He sank into his chair, staring blankly at the glowing screen. Outside, rain began to fall, streaking the tall windows like silent judgment. Lila placed a hand on his shoulder, part comfort, part fear. Then stop her before she ruins everything. He looked up at her, anger and panic mixing in his eyes. You don't stop Grace once she starts something. You just wait and hope she gets tired, Lila scoffed. She's a single mother with 3 kids. How dangerous can she be? Daniel didn't answer. The image of Grace's quiet determination, her calm eyes, her silence that once unnerved him flashed in his mind. He had seen that look before, years ago, when she made impossible things happen through sheer will. His phone buzzed. Another email. This one from an investor he'd known for years. Daniel, we're freezing all pending contracts until the Axiom audit clears. I suggest transparency. The market's talking. Daniel's grip tightened around the phone until his knuckles whitened. The walls of his empire, the one he'd built to prove he didn't need her, were beginning to crack. Lila's voice broke through the silence. You're overthinking this. Just handle it like you always do. Talk your way out. He turned to her slowly, his tone colder than the rain outside. This isn't talk, Lila. This is war. The camera of life lingered on the glowing laptop screen, Grace's name shining in the center of the email, bold and unflinching. Somewhere across the city, she was watching her plan unfold piece by piece. And as Daniel stared at the rain-streaked window, the faint reflection of his own fear stared back, quiet, pale, and growing. In that reflection, a whisper of dread formed, the kind that comes when you realize your past has finally caught up. Because soon, it wouldn't just be rumors, it would be exposure. The sound of cameras clicking filled the air like a sudden storm. Flashes went off in every direction, bouncing off the marble floors and glass walls of the Axiom headquarters. The tension was heavy, electric, every eye in the massive boardroom locked on one door. It opened slowly. Grace Turner walked in. Her presence silenced the room. Dressed in a sleek black suit, hair pulled neatly into a bun, and calm eyes that saw everything, she didn't need to raise her voice. The sound of her heels striking the polished floor was enough. The executives whispered among themselves. The press at the back raised their cameras higher. At the far end of the long table sat Daniel Turner, confident on the outside, but pale beneath his mask. He'd received the summons for this integration meeting 2 days ago, not knowing who would be attending. Now, as Grace stepped into the light, his breath caught. He hadn't seen her in over a year. She looked nothing like the woman he left crying in that apartment. Gone was the softness. What replaced it was quiet power. Grace placed a folder on the table, straightened her jacket, and spoke in a tone both steady and unshakable. Effective today, she said, her voice echoing through the boardroom. Eden Holdings has finalized its acquisition of Turner & Associates. I'll be assuming interim control. Gasps broke the silence. The flash of cameras intensified. Daniel rose from his seat. What are you talking about? His voice cracked slightly, the room amplifying every word. You can't just walk in here and... Grace turned her gaze toward him, calm but piercing. Can. And I did. She opened the folder and slid a stack of documents across the table. Here are the merger filings, legal authorizations, and ownership confirmations. All verified by the SEC and Axiom Group. Your firm now falls under my management structure. Daniel's hand trembled as he picked up the papers. Every line confirmed the truth. His company, his pride, now belonged to her. The CEO of Axiom cleared his throat. Miss Turner, we didn't realize Eden Holdings was you. Grace gave a polite smile. That was intentional. The boardroom murmured again, the realization spreading like wildfire. Daniel swallowed hard. Grace, you planned this? Her eyes locked on his. No, Daniel. You did. She reached for a remote and clicked the projector. The screen behind her came to life, a timeline of bank transfers, emails, and corporate expense reports. Let's review your company's financial conduct during your leadership, she said evenly. Slide after slide revealed payments to luxury accounts, hotel stays, and private gifts, all traced to Daniel's use of corporate funds during his relationship with Lila. The audience's whispers turned to audible gasps. Journalists scribbled notes, executives exchanged uneasy looks. Grace's voice stayed calm. As you can see, these funds were drawn from company accounts originally financed through Axiom's seed investment, meaning, technically, through me. She paused. You used my work to fund your affair. Daniel's face drained of color. Grace, stop this. We can talk privately. She cut him off gently, almost pitying. No. You taught me that some conversations need witnesses. The CEO leaned forward, uneasy. Miss Turner, these findings, they imply serious ethical violations. Grace nodded. They do. Which is why, as interim controller, I'll be initiating a full compliance audit immediately. The room exploded with noise. Questions, murmurs, flashes. Lila, sitting near the back as PR consultant, stood abruptly. This is a setup. You can't humiliate him like this. Grace turned to her, calm and almost kind. You're right. I didn't humiliate him. He did that himself. Lila's face flushed red. Daniel looked at her, desperate, but she stepped back, realizing the cameras were capturing everything. Grace gathered her papers slowly, her movements precise, deliberate. I didn't destroy your world, Daniel, she said, her tone soft but cutting through the noise. You signed it away the day you left. Daniel sank back into his chair, breathing uneven, surrounded by flashing lights and whispers. Everything he built, the empire he left her to chase, had been handed back to her by his own ignorance. Grace turned toward the board. We'll begin restructuring tomorrow. I trust you all value transparency. No one spoke. She closed her folder, tucked it under her arm, and walked toward the door. The sound of her heels echoed strong, rhythmic, final. As she reached the exit, she paused, her reflection glinting in the glass door. Some debts, she said quietly, don't need collecting. They collect themselves. And with that, she walked out. Behind her, the room erupted, executives calling lawyers, reporters rushing forward, Daniel shouting her name. But Grace didn't turn back. The elevator doors slid shut, sealing the chaos above her. Inside, she finally exhaled. She glanced down at her phone, a message notification from her lawyer, Miss Evelyn Hart. Phase 2 approved. Press statement scheduled for tomorrow morning. Grace's lips curved into a faint smile. Tomorrow, she whispered, they'll see the whole truth. Outside the skyscraper, thunder rumbled in the distance, low, steady, like the sound of justice arriving. And somewhere in the city below, Daniel Turner's empire continued to crumble, one silent signature at a time. The flash of cameras was blinding. Reporters shouted from every angle as Daniel Turner tried to push through the crowd, his suit wrinkled, his face pale and desperate. The once confident CEO, who had built his image on control and charm, now looked like a man drowning in his own lies. Mr. Turner, is it true you used company funds to support your affair? Mr. Turner, are you resigning voluntarily or under pressure? Where is your wife or ex-wife now? He didn't answer. He couldn't. Flashes exploded in his eyes. His bodyguard tried to block the reporters, but the damage had already been done. Every camera caught the same moment, Daniel Turner's face breaking under the weight of his own downfall. Behind him, the massive glass doors of Turner and Associates were being sealed shut. Security teams carried out boxes marked confidential documents. The headlines came fast. CEO Daniel Turner removed amid scandal. Financial misconduct. Exposed. A cautionary tale of greed. Lila Carter silent as company collapses. It was over. Hours later, the mansion that once gleamed with luxury now stood cold and quiet. The air smelled faintly of expensive perfume and regret. Lila Carter stood in the doorway, suitcase by her side. Her makeup was perfect, but her eyes were hollow. She looked at Daniel, who sat slumped on the couch, surrounded by torn newspapers and unopened letters. "You promised me this wouldn't happen," she said softly, her tone more tired than angry. Daniel looked up, voice raw. "You think I planned this? I lost everything." Lila gave a bitter laugh. "No, Daniel. You threw everything away." He tried to reach for her hand, but she pulled away. "I didn't sign up for this kind of attention," she continued. "I thought you were powerful, not reckless." Her phone buzzed another notification from a gossip site. She silenced it and picked up her bag. "Where will you go?" he asked, voice small. She paused at the door. "Somewhere your name can't reach me." And then she was gone, her heels clicking against the marble, fading down the hallway like a closing chapter. Outside, paparazzi lights flickered again, capturing her leaving the mansion in silence. The next morning, the image was everywhere. Mistress walks out as Turner faces legal action. Across the city, in a cozy apartment filled with soft morning light, Grace sat at her kitchen table, a cup of tea beside her. Her triplets, now 1-year-old, giggled on the floor, stacking colorful blocks that clattered gently on the rug. The television in the background hummed with breaking news. Following the financial scandal and public exposure, former CEO Daniel Turner has been officially removed from his position. Sources confirm all assets will be audited under new ownership. The firm is expected to restructure under Axiom Group's oversight. Grace didn't flinch. She didn't smile, either. She simply watched for a moment, then reached over and turned down the volume. The sound of her children filled the silence, instead laughter, babbling, innocence untouched by the noise of adult mistakes. She stood, walked over to them, and knelt down. One of the babies tugged at her sleeve, holding up a toy block like a trophy. Grace laughed softly, brushing a lock of hair behind her ear. "You know," she said gently, her voice barely above a whisper, "some storms clean more than they destroy." The babies giggled again as if agreeing, their eyes bright and full of life. Grace looked toward the window. Outside, the rain had stopped, and sunlight spilled across the city skyline, the same skyline that once made her feel small. Now, it felt like hers. Her phone buzzed on the table. A message from her mentor, Evelyn Hart, flashed on the screen. "Everything is final. His shares are dissolved. You're free, Grace." Grace read the words, then exhaled slowly. She picked up her cup of tea, her fingers steady. Freedom. Not loud, not dramatic, just peaceful. She looked down at her children again, her smile soft but strong. "We made it," she whispered, quietly. The television flickered one last time, showing Daniel's image walking alone through the courthouse doors, head bowed, reporters still chasing. Grace turned the TV off. The screen went black, her reflection replacing his. For the first time, she saw herself not as a victim, but as someone whole again. She walked to the window, holding one of her children in her arms, the city glowing beneath her. The world was finally quiet. Then, in the silence, her phone buzzed once more, a new message from Axiom Group Legal Division. "Your presence is requested at the upcoming press briefing to discuss future leadership roles." Grace's expression didn't change. She simply glanced at the message, set the phone down, and whispered to herself, "The story isn't over yet." Outside, thunder rumbled faintly again, distant, calm, but promising that something bigger was still on its way. Rain poured over the city like a curtain of glass, heavy and relentless. The parking lot outside Axiom's corporate tower shimmered with reflections, silver puddles, blurred headlights, and the ghostly shape of a man standing alone, Daniel Turner. His suit was soaked, his hair plastered to his forehead. He had been standing there for nearly an hour, waiting for the one person who no longer owed him a single word. The automatic doors slid open. Grace stepped out. She wore a long beige coat, her hair pinned neatly, a black umbrella in her hand. The rain softened around her as if afraid to touch her. The air between them froze. He took a step forward, his voice trembling. Grace! She stopped, eyes steady but unreadable. Daniel. He swallowed hard, his tone desperate, shaky. I made a mistake. I know that now. I lost control of my company, of my life, of you. But we can fix this. Grace blinked once. Fix? Daniel's shoulders sagged. I'm sorry. I didn't see what I had until it was gone. I thought success would fill the emptiness, but it didn't. It destroyed me. He took another step closer. I see you everywhere now, every boardroom, every headline. You're stronger than you ever were, and it kills me that I'm not part of it. For a long moment, Grace said nothing. Only the rain spoke, tapping softly against her umbrella. Then she lowered it slightly, letting the rain hit her face. Her voice was calm, the kind that carried truth sharper than anger. You taught me silence, Daniel, she said slowly. You left me in it. You built your world on my quiet loyalty, thinking silence meant weakness. But I learned something. She took a step closer, her eyes holding his. Silence isn't empty. It's where people rebuild. Daniel's lips parted, his eyes glistening. Grace, please. I'm not asking for money or power. I just want you to forgive me. I can't live with what I did. Grace looked at him, not with hate, but with something far heavier. Understanding. Forgiveness doesn't mean return, she said gently. It just means I'm not carrying your guilt anymore. He tried to reach for her, but she stepped back, her hands steady. I already did what you never could. I moved on. Her words cut deeper than anger ever could. Daniel stood there, trembling, his reflection rippling in the puddle below. The empire he lost, the woman he betrayed, the future he threw away, all mirrored back at him in broken fragments of rainwater. Grace opened her umbrella again, the quiet whoosh echoing like final punctuation. She gave him one last look, not cruel, not bitter, just final. You taught me silence, she repeated softly. I just used it better. Then she turned and walked away. Her reflection in the puddles shimmered with each step, calm, composed, untouchable. The camera of life lingered on Daniel's figure, shrinking behind her, blurred by rain and regret. He sank to his knees, whispering to no one, I'm sorry. Grace didn't look back. She reached her car, opened the door, and paused for only a moment. Through the misted window, her face was still, illuminated by the city lights, not triumphant, not vengeful, just peaceful. The rain slowed, turning into a quiet drizzle. As she drove off, the windshield wipers brushed away the last traces of the storm. In the rearview mirror, Daniel grew smaller until he disappeared completely, a ghost swallowed by rain and consequence. Grace whispered under her breath, almost like a prayer. Some endings don't need applause, just silence. She drove into the night, headlights piercing through the fog. And far ahead, lightning flickered once, not as a warning, but as a quiet reminder. Even peace can carry the echo of unfinished stories. The city was alive again, bright, golden, full of sound. But this time, the noise wasn't chaos, it was harmony. Inside the tall glass tower of Eden Holdings, sunlight poured through the wide windows, warming the air with soft light. The once empty office now carried the faint sounds of laughter, 3 small children playing near the corner, their tiny hands stacking toy blocks on a carpet beside a desk that ruled half the skyline. Grace sat behind that desk, calm, composed, whole. Her pen glided over a document, the final approval form, for a charitable foundation she was creating in her children's names. The plaque on the desk read simply, Grace E. Turner, CEO, founder. On the wall behind her hung 2 framed keepsakes. One, the official merger certificate from the $100 billion deal she had once unknowingly completed. The other, a family photo of her holding her triplets, smiling against the morning light. Both framed pieces told the same story. One of creation through pain, of power through patience. Her assistant, Clara, entered quietly with a cup of tea. Morning, Miss Turner, she said warmly. The board meeting's in 30 minutes. Grace nodded, glancing at the clock. Thank you, Clara, and please, no interruptions for the next 10. Clara smiled and left, closing the glass door behind her. Grace leaned back in her chair and looked out across the city, the same skyline she once watched from her tiny apartment, exhausted and heartbroken. Now it watched her back with quiet respect. For a long moment she said nothing. Then, Almost to herself, she began to speak softly, her voice steady, reflective, like a quiet narration carried on sunlight. "I never sought revenge," she murmured. "I sought respect." She turned her gaze to the photo of her children. "And when you respect yourself, justice follows." Her words hung in the stillness, honest and unpretentious, not the voice of a woman who won, but of one who learned. She thought of Daniel for a brief moment, not with hatred, not even sadness, just understanding. Everyone builds their empire on something. His was pride. Hers was perseverance. She opened a drawer and took out a sealed envelope marked Confidential Settlement Agreement. It was from Daniel's lawyers, the last official tie between them. Grace smiled faintly and slipped it into a box labeled Archive. It was done. She turned back toward the window, where her reflection overlapped with the skyline, a blend of the woman she used to be and the one she had become. Her triplets giggled behind her, knocking over their tower of blocks. She laughed softly, stood and knelt beside them, helping them rebuild. "See?" she whispered, aligning the first block with care. "When it falls, we just start again, but smarter." The children nodded, unaware of the depth behind their mother's words. A calm silence filled the room. No chaos, no fear, just peace. Grace looked up one last time, her eyes meeting the morning sun. The light reflected in her pupils, bright, unwavering, full of quiet promise. Her voice came again, steady and final. "The world doesn't always reward noise. Sometimes the loudest victory is lived in silence." The camera of life slowly pulled back, her children laughing, the city glowing beyond the window, Grace standing tall between the two worlds she had built. And as the light washed over her office, the final image froze, the framed merger certificate and the family photo side by side, symbols of everything she had lost and everything she had become. Grace's story reminds us that strength isn't in fighting louder, it's in standing longer. True revenge isn't destruction, it's dignity. When you rebuild with respect, even the ruins of your past become the foundation of your power. And just before the fade out, her voice calm, proud, unwavering echoes one last time. "I didn't rise to hurt anyone. I rose because I finally remembered who I was."